Welcome back to another episode of the RPE podcast. My name's Connor, and today I'm joined by Steve. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, good, mate. Not doing too bad on holidays at the moment, which is good.
Awesome stuff. And Steve and I today are joined by a very special guest. We're very lucky and honoured to be joined by this guest, and that is Joseph Coyne. So Joseph has a huge depth and range of knowledge in the strength and conditioning space, and we're super excited to have him on. How you going, Joseph?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Good. Thank you. Thanks for the kind words and having me on.
No, thank you very much. So just for those listeners who aren't aware of you and your work, would you like to give us a bit of background about yourself, how you got into S&C, and then how you've progressed throughout your journey and your career to where you are today?
Well, yeah. So the journey probably started when I was getting chased around by when I was 9 years old by two big Māori girls in like Tolliga Bay, New Zealand, and I couldn't outrun them, and I wasn't stronger than them, and they had hockey sticks, and they bit the crap out of me. And so I was like, since then, that probably sparked my sort of curiosity around getting sort of stronger and faster and being able to run, that type of thing. Yeah, look, after university, from New Zealand originally, and after university, I came to Australia. I did like a Bachelor of Physical Education, which was actually a sports science degree. You couldn't go and teach with it. It was just I guess it's showing my age, but New Zealand didn't have any sports science degrees on offer at the time. I think in my second year, one might have popped up at the Waikato University or something like that. And so, yeah, I did this 4-year undergrad of PE, and then there's like I stayed for another year to do like a teaching diploma, because, like I said, you couldn't go teaching with that degree. So just in case I wanted to be a PE teacher at some stage, came over to Australia, was playing sort of park footy in Australia in Tweed Heads, and then started working out of a gym, doing some personal training. Got involved with ACE at the time, which is now ESA, Exercise and Sports Science Australia, became an exercise physiologist, or got accredited as one. And in the meantime, I've been sort of coaching athletes privately, strength and conditioning coaching athletes privately on the Gold Coast. Gold Coast is like triathletes, surfers, swimmers, predominantly some rugby league players as well, guys I actually played with, and like had made the sort of professional ranks, NRL ranks, started coming to see me, that type of thing. And then, yeah, look, long convoluted stories, but ended up in 2014, I'd sort of done consulting gigs or sort of contract gigs with groups like Queensland Academy of Sport, done a bit of consulting with Sydney Roosters, stuff like that. In 2014, I actually got a role with the Chinese Olympic Committee. I was contracted to a company called Exos, well, actually Athletes Performance at the time, which is a company in the United States. And if anybody listening wants to look into them, they're like awesome company. Do some really good professional development work. But they had a contract. They had contracts with like the German World Cup winning soccer team or football team. I believe that was 2013. Argentinian rugby, Chinese Olympics 2012. And a few other different like international sporting things. So they had a department that just went around and got these big contracts internationally, and I got the nod for a role that they had available over with the Chinese Olympic Committee, where just like they supported 2012 Olympics, now they were supporting 2016 Olympics. I thought it was pretty cool going to China, a real like institutionalized sporting system, kind of like Soviet bloc type thing. Every system's fully professional. It's not like the poor sods here in Australia that might have to go to training and then work, like pull a 9 to 5 as a bricklayer or something like that, and then head back to training in the evening, trying to get there, trying to go to the Olympics and things like that. So I did that, and one of the sort of ways I got into that was a knowledge of, and I'd worked with sprinters and actually beach sprinters as well from the Gold Coast. There's a lot of beach sprinters I worked with. I had a little bit of a background in track and field, and after that contract actually finished, I got offered a role with Chinese Athletics Association, with Track and Field Federation, basically, in their jump and sprint section as a physical preparation coach. So I did that. That was about just under 2 years. In that time, I started a PhD, came back home, worked pretty much full-time on PhD, a little bit of part-time work. And then, so that was after World Champs in 2017. So London, came home, worked for about 8 months. And then I got asked to head up. The UFC was setting up a performance institute, Ultimate Fighting Championship. They got a performance institute in Las Vegas. They're setting one up in Shanghai in an effort to get into the Chinese market. They needed somebody to sort of head up the program for the first 2 years. And I was lucky enough to get that role and went over to do that sort of early 2019. Heavily COVID affected, but that ended in 2021. And then since then I've come back to Australia and working at a university and actually a local high school at the moment, which has been pretty rewarding.
Awesome, mate. It sounds like you've done a bit of everything, every sport, every type of career pathway that you can kind of get out of this. Is there anything else you kind of are moving towards or want to go into that you haven't done yet?
Yeah, I don't know. To be honest, I grew up playing like rugby union and rugby league, and that would probably be the last thing to sort of tick off my box. The other thing would maybe be an American sport. I've actually been about like a nose whisker away from going for the States and a sort of a role with a baseball team, like a Major League Baseball team, but they didn't eventuate for a couple of different reasons. But those would probably be the two things that I'd be I'll tick off the bucket list. But I've been really lucky with what I've done so far, and if those things don't happen, I wouldn't be too worried either. Pretty content and happy where I am at the moment.
Awesome.
Mate, that's awesome. And it's going to be cool. Like I was just thinking with listing off those sports, because we're going to be talking plyometrics today. It's really cool that you're going to have there's going to be different plyometric abilities that you would have had to have trained and rehab from, like, say, beach sprinting and then upper body stuff with the UFC. So it'll be really good going.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, one of the, I guess, the good parts of the Chinese Olympic Committee role was that was you're like at an institute, so you worked across different sports. So I worked across sports like basketball and volleyball, ping pong, like very important sport in China, and there's a lot of plyometric activity in that as well, like a massive amount, and train it a lot at the high level. So that was pretty interesting as well.
Far out, that's awesome. So if we're going to chat plyometrics, if we just start with the basics. So just for those who are new to plyometrics, what is a plyometric exercise? What differentiates it from other movements, and kind of what components make up a plyometric activity?
Yeah, so I guess it's a bit of I wouldn't say nebulous term, but probably a term that's used interchangeably just with jumping, right? And what a plyometric, it just involves a stretch shortening cycle. So there's this mechanism in the body where you can basically use elastic energy, and that's the stretch shortening cycle. Now there's slow stretch shortening cycle activities and fast stretch shortening cycle activities. A guy called Schmidt-Blyder, he sort of recommended that anything below a time domain below 250 milliseconds, so a quarter of a second, if it was below that or faster than that, it would be considered a fast stretch shortening cycle activity and would fit in what we would normally consider a plyometric. Anything above that, slow stretch shortening cycle activity, what you could say isn't technically a plyometric. But even slow stretch shortening cycle activities still involve the stretch shortening cycle. And so there's the component. So you could call them fast stretch shortening cycle activities. Anything below that sort of 250 millisecond. Some people have recommended, I think Coyne recommended like 300 milliseconds. So it's in and around that time frame, 250, 300 milliseconds below that, in terms of how long does it take for you to absorb and produce force, essentially, for there to be an eccentric, sometimes very short isometric and concentric action.
Awesome. And it sounds as if, there's such a broad scope of what a plyometric is that there must be a continuum all the way from really slow plyometrics to really fast plyometrics. Yeah. Is there much difference in kind of what happens physically in a slow plyometric versus a fast plyometric? Like the demands of the topic?
Yeah, for sure, right? It's like just the rate that you need to be able to absorb and produce force is much greater. And the forces will go up exponentially in different muscle groups pending that contraction speed. And what I mentioned before, it's somewhat nebulous, is because people consider, say, a counter movement jump a plyometric activity, but most times people will be spending sort of 350 to 500, maybe even 600 milliseconds, depending on how deep they go and how slow they are in their counter movement to go through eccentric and concentric contraction. So that your continuum ranges all the way from, say, sprinting, and maybe probably even faster than that would be throwing a kick or a punch in martial arts. But sprinting, right, contact times 80 to 100 milliseconds on average. 80 would be really fast. 90 is about the average in like a world championship final. All the way to like your throws and that type of thing, where you're talking similar to a counter movement jump. Contact times might be around 350 milliseconds. All the way to something like traditional strength training, where contact times obviously might be, if you think of a powerlifting squat, 6 seconds, you know what I mean, by the time they go down and then back up and struggle away with something. So, or struggle away with the load on their back. So you've got this range. They're all eccentric, concentric contractions. They all involve some type of stretch shortening cycle activity. Some of it's much faster, some of it's much slower.
Do you find that with your athletes, depending on, I guess, what end of the spectrum their sport exists in more, you get more bang for buck at one end of the spectrum specificity-wise in kind of doing your plyometrics, kind of doing more of their volume in that specific range, or do you need to kind of do more in the lower ranges and building them up, or a bit of a mix through the season? Like, how do you go about your programming for someone, say, if they're in those really quick things like sprinting and that type of really quick, fast plyometric range?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's definitely like dictated by your philosophy, right? But essentially you've got this like force velocity curve. Right up one end might be like your powerlifting activities, and it might go into Olympic weightlifting, and then throws, and then jumping and sprinting, just as a really basic overview. And so if just as a general rule of thumb, you might go, okay, what are they getting in their sport? So if it's a track and field athlete, they might be getting sprinting and jumping. Okay, let's fill in the blanks with the throws and the Olympic ballistic style work with the Olympic weightlifting and the strength training. Let's fill in the gaps on the force velocity curve. Then you'll get to a point where that probably won't keep driving adaptations that actually improve the sporting performance. And then after that, you need to go in and do things in and around those time domains that that athlete is working in their actual sport. So it might be sprinting faster than normal, sprinting but slower than normal, sprinting with more body weight than normal, sprinting with less body weight than normal. So those type of things will all change and be really specific to the activity you're working with. And yeah, that's generally my philosophy. Is when we start, I fill in the gaps. Once they have a good base, then we get a bit more particular in and around the actual segment of the force velocity curve that we really want to focus on to improve performance. Then, of course, when you're starting with athletes, there's different types of jumps or plyometric activities, and low amplitude and high amplitude. Like, for instance, skipping would be a really low amplitude activity that is plyometric, you know what I mean? And then there's higher and higher amplitude activities, repeated jumps, step jumps, drop jumps, all those types of things.
Interestingly, talking about skipping, actually, I was just going to go into something there where I know there was recently, I think it was last year, there was a study come out where they did like 5 minutes of skipping. I think they're in 5K runners or something like that. And I was just wondering then, like almost theorizing, maybe it was like they improved their 5K times with just kind of adding skipping versus just kind of doing the running. And I was wondering whether or not it is, as you were saying, it's kind of almost with those particular runners, it filled in that gap of, you know, is a close enough ground contact time to what they're doing when they're running that 5K, but you know, they could probably fill in maybe, I don't know, would it be a touch slower or a touch quicker? The ground contact times there, but it must be similar enough anyway that it's really kind of working on that, their weaknesses that they were needing to improve there in their kind of calf and soleus kind of complex and Achilles tendon to kind of drive the elastic recoil that they need.
For sure. I mean, and that would all depend on what caliber of 5K runner, what the mechanism is for performance improvement would depend on what caliber of 5K runner they are. If they're running around 20 minutes versus if they're running around 15 minutes, that's a big difference in contact times, and whether skipping is going to be giving them the same stimulus or a faster stimulus. You know what I mean? And if they're running around 25 minutes, like skipping will definitely be a faster stimulus than what they used to. All sorts of things, calf musculature, ankle stiffness, all that type of thing. You'd think that you'd hope that it would improve contact times in not just sprinting, but also middle distance, long distance runners. I've used it. I use it. So you've got skipping with a rope, right? And then skipping as like drills and different variations of different drills. And I've used both as a way of, one, just developing resiliency in that lower sort of calf ankle complex. And really looking at it from like a, almost like a training load point of view, that you have to put it through a certain amount of work for it to adapt and be strong enough to handle certain things. And if you don't have that, or if you've got poor development there, it's 100% it's going to help you running.
Yep, awesome.
And they're all being, I guess, examples of lower amplitude and kind of higher volume that you can handle with lower amplitude kind of plyometrics versus, as you were saying, then like you got then the things like drop jumps and that, which you probably wouldn't do as much as you would yourself.
Yeah, for sure, and it all depends on the athlete and what they're used to. Like it's a case of you give them enough that causes some adaptation, but if you give them too much, it'll cause maladaptation. So it's all based on who you have in front of them, who you have in front of you, and like I'd probably say there's a whole heap of fear around dip jumps and drop jumps, but it's probably in a lot of ways it's unfounded. Essentially, you'll want to limit volume if you're coming off boxes that are higher than your actual vertical jump. Otherwise, you could be doing drop jumps or dip jumps off boxes or heights, and if they're lower than your vertical jump, you're actually absorbing more force just from jumping on the ground and then landing, or doing repeated jumps, jumping and landing. And then we have some sports, so I think of snowboarding or gymnastics or things like that, where athletes are landing from heights that are far higher than what you might be getting them jumping off in the gym. And I've actually done that in the past, where I've had sort of gymnasts step off 2 meter high boxes and land and have an absorb strategy, and then a like a real shock strategy where they're really trying to attack the ground and things like that. So it's just a function of who you have in front of you, what are they used to in their sport, and what's going to give them some type of adaptation.
Awesome. So working with like a new athlete, how do you do any tests around finding their entry point, or do you just go based off like how they're doing in their sport? Do you use their performance as a bit of a guide as to where to start with their plyometric type training, or do you have specific tests you use?
Yeah, so I do. It depends. Like I've got a batch of like jumping tests I might use, and I might apply that in like an a la carte fashion based on who I have, what sport I'm dealing with. But I mean, your basic one is just a counter movement jump. From there, I can give you a height for dip jumps and drop jumps almost immediately. Basically, it's just 10% higher than your best counter movement jump height. And then you can go, okay, if I jump 40 centimeters in a counter movement jump, the optimal height for you to start doing depth jumps will be at 45 centimeters. It's pretty simple. Otherwise, you're better off just jumping repeatedly on the ground. But so counter movement jump, then depending on things like just basic height, like an easy marker for males is hands on hips from a force plate or a timing mat, whether you're using like impulse momentum or flight time calculations. If it's above 40 centimeters, that's probably a good place where you can start being a bit more advanced with it. And then to start assessing more of the fast stretch, shortening cycle activities, I'll use something like a repeated jump or a repeated pogo. It's like a 10-5 RSI type test, or 10-5 pogo, where essentially you might jump 10 times. You take the 5 best of those and average them out. You can look at flight time and contact time. You would only, one of the sort of caveats there is you'd normally like all of those contact times to be under 250 milliseconds. So that's a sort of marker for what you're looking at, but that's another one I'd look at, and just to assess sort of stretch shortening cycle function. You can do that 2 legs, 1 leg, same with counter movement jump, 2 legs, 1 leg. And with the 1 legs, you just have to be aware that your contact times are going to be a bit higher. So now it might be sort of 300 milliseconds that you're looking at. And then you can also do sort of compare non-stretch shortening cycle activity to stretch shortening cycle activity. So a non-counter movement jump, a squat jump to a counter movement jump, and you'll get a thing called eccentric utilization ratio. Not only will this tell you how well an athlete uses their stretch shortening cycle. So for instance, if a person is very good at using the stretch shortening cycle, their counter movement jump will be much greater than their non-counter movement jump. So a non-counter movement jump, go down the bottom, pause 3 seconds, take away any type of elastic recall that they can use, and then jump as high as you can, hands on hips. Counter movement jump, hands on hips, go down and up as fast as you can, jump as high as possible. Then if so in that case, if the counter movement jump is much greater, you might say, okay, we want to work on rate of force production activities to bring up your non-counter movement jump. And vice versa, if non-counter movement jump and counter movement jump are really close, you might say, I need to do more stretch shortening cycle activities because now this is too close to one another. Also for physio is a really good marker of tendon health in the knee. So people that don't have good tendon health in the knee and lower extremity, you'll be looking at eccentric utilization ratios that are really close together because they can't use that elastic recall. And yeah, I've used that in volleyballers and basketballers as a marker in single limb tests, especially for rehab and as a sort of proxy for tendon health.
Awesome. And you're just measuring that on a force plate, or are you using video to measure height? What's the way that you normally go about it?
Yeah, so you just need a height measure, whether that's done from a flight time calculation on a timing mat or a force plate, which would be either a flight time calculation or an impulse momentum, like a takeoff velocity. You can use a push band, like an accelerometer to do it. You can use like a IMU, which is the same thing. It's like an accelerometer. You can literally hang a ball above the head and get them to jump and touch a ball above the head. You can use video like on your phone, slow motion video. Smart Jump is a app. I believe it's Smart Jump.
My Jump.
A brain fade here, but yeah, I've used that in the past. You can use a linear positions transducer like GymAware, which is probably the most accurate thing, to be honest. But yeah, and it is just a jump height marker that you're after. Of course, you can dig into the weeds a bit more if you do have force plates and look at things like eccentric peak velocities. You can look at things like concentric force, that type of thing, and those give a bit more insight into what you're looking at. But a real basic profile can be done really simply and really well just with jump height.
Awesome.
Do you look and see, like, say, as in rehab, say we're going down that for the physios in the room, like as the tendon is normalizing, it's in getting less pain, they're kind of building up, say, their strength, their quad strength, all those type of things have got to going up. You notice that those kind of eccentric utilization ratio also kind of come.
Oh, sorry, I just missed that.
Sorry, I was just saying, do you notice that during rehab, that eccentric utilization ratio is something that you notice come up like in line with, say, quad strength, in line with like the pain decreasing, quadriceps tendinopathy, something like that?
Yeah, for sure, 100%. The more pain there is, not only the less they'll be able to use that stretch shortening cycle. And then like one of the big sort of facets of a philosophy I have around return to players is like you might talk like limb symmetry index, and like jump height's a really crude marker of things. Same with strength. Like if you're just looking at strength, you're probably missing it. Like I much prefer to think of say power wattage. If it's a strength-based exercise, like how many watts are they producing in say left leg versus right leg, and then also what is their actual elastic capabilities? What does the stretch shortening cycle look like in those when the one leg, the sort of injured limb compared to the uninjured limb, and I'd say it's probably not that important in terms of asymmetry, but is it above the standard that you think is required for them to participate in their sport? So maybe it's like 7 times body weight for running. You know what I mean? And that's probably more important. Like if I had a person that say 200 watts is the cutoff, more like 2000 watts would be the cutoff. And I had a person that was 2,200 watts and 2,700 watts, I wouldn't, in one leg compared to the other, I wouldn't be too worried. But if one leg is like 2,000 watts and the other one's like 1,300 watts, then I'll be really worried about the asymmetry, if that made sense.
So you're only looking for like really large discrepancies on that kind of test?
Only if it's below the marker that you think is required for that particular activity.
Yep.
And then, the discrepancies, that would be a second order. I'd consider that first and foremost. And then if I really wanted to dive deeper and we had the opportunity, then I might go into like what is one limb compared to the other, if they were both above. But if they're both above, then I might not worry about it because they're probably functional enough. So it's just a philosophy around like inherently nobody is symmetrical, and it's just understanding like you'll have say long jumpers, for instance. I spent sort of 2 years working with some of the best in the world. Their takeoff leg is much stronger than their non-takeoff leg. But if you tried to if you spent all your time trying to fix up the non-takeoff leg and make them stronger in that, you probably wouldn't get many performance improvements in their actual sport.
Yeah. I'm just thinking the same for tennis. Like if you got the serving arm and you're trying to bring up their non-serving arm to like the speed of their other arm, you're just wasting your time. Like,
yeah, I will put a caveat on that though. I will put a caveat on that because there is, I definitely believe, say the non-dominant limb, there's benefits for say serving left, right, in terms of like injury prevention. Even like running around the track the opposite way. Everybody always runs around the track the same way, right? At athletics, running around the track the opposite way. Every now and then, it's not going to be all the time. Volleyball, serving with your non-dominant hand, you know what I mean? Throwing with your non-dominant hand, all those things all one, there might be an injury offset or injury risk reduction there. And then two, with what we know about skill acquisition, it will probably make you the non-dominant limb, you getting better in your non-dominant limb, will probably help you perform and give you more information about how to perform really well in your dominant limb. So it's not a waste of time, but there's benefits to it, you know what I mean? And there's different scenarios like return to sport and otherwise healthy or apparently healthy. But yeah, I'm a big believer actually in doing a lot of work in the non-dominant limb. And if I had tennis players that I was coaching, I'd be like, yeah, you should do some serving left-handed. And at least in your warm-up, you know what I mean? Just to get a feel for it and get these benefits from skill development and also potential injury risk reduction.
That's awesome. I don't think I've heard of anyone using left-handed serves or non-dominant arm serves to improve performance. Like, it's not something that we ever got brought up with. That's super interesting.
Yeah. So the Chinese women's volleyball team used to actually do it. They were gold medal winners in Rio, and they would do that in maybe like 3 warm-ups a week. Practice non-dominant arm spiking and non-dominant arm serving, that type of thing.
Awesome.
That's cool. And going back to Connor's thing with someone getting first back into plyometrics as well, I was thinking, I wrote an article for Physio Network, but I kind of argue against my own point that I wrote of like, I set out like a whole continuum of, and you kind of would go through, you know, maybe practice the force creation or force absorption, then creation and all that type of stuff. But realistically, when I'm in and coaching someone, I don't kind of force them to go through, okay, you've got to show me that you can do all these kind of, you know, we're going to start off at force absorbing work and kind of slow plyometric works no matter what. Like, I kind of just, wherever they are at the time, kind of whatever competency they can show me they can jump, that's kind of where we start. What do you do? Do you take someone through like you've got to kind of earn the right to get to a certain area, or you just start them wherever they are kind of at, or what's your kind of philosophy around starting someone on plyometrics there?
I'd say that those are actually pretty synonymous. Like you've got a progression or continuum in your head, like say absorption, then creation. So even if it's like non-counter movement before counter movement, then double contact, then continuous jumps or depth jumps, drop jumps, like off a box, those are all continuums. And it's just, okay, we have this, and you're screening them when you're in this coaching process. You're screening them during that moment. Okay, what can you actually do? And if they can already do they already have this aptitude, you know they probably tick the boxes prior to that part of that continuum. And so it might take you a session to get to that. But yeah, there's that's just like a screening process in of itself, even if it's not a real formalized thing, but it's day-to-day coaching, you know what I mean? It's similar to, you can do a depth jump profile where you, or drop jump profile where, and I'll talk drop jumps. Depth jump, you come off a box and jump for maximum height. Drop jump, you come off a box and spend as little amount of time on the ground as possible. So say a drop jump profile, you might do say 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 centimeters to see what your best RSI is, or flight time and relative to contact time. And that might be a profile that'll tell you what height you should use with this athlete, like the optimal height. But you can, you can just use, like I said before, the defunct, or just 10% above their best counter movement jump height, because now you know that'll be causing some adaptation. And 2, you can just do that in a training session. You don't actually have to do a profile. You can just be like, okay, today, first set, you're going off 20 centimeters. Next set, you're going off 40. Next set, you're going off 60. At the end of that, at the end of your 3 sets, was it still going up? All right, next week, we're going to be doing 60, 80, 100. Like, you know what I mean? And then you just work at it from there. So yeah, it's just, you're just embedding that in your own coaching.
Awesome. So just slowly increasing the amount of intensity to just check, see where they're at, and then picking 10% above what you think is going to get them a performance adaptation, either next session or later that session, kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And it might not even be intensity, it might be volume as well. Like that's just a like rule of thumb, right? It's like, okay, see where they're at, give them something that's going to advance them, but it's going to like give some type of adaptation for them.
Awesome.
Can I dig a little bit into something that you said before? Like the two, I love how you use the words like in plyometrics, you had one that was like attacking them, and the other, I can't remember the exact word, but something like more like they were kind of meeting it, and it was a little bit of a softer, like something that you would think of as more like a stiff plyometric, a real quick, springy kind of plyometric, that attacking versus that softer one. And I was thinking like implications for that, and say some of our lower limb common pathologies, like, you know, tendinopathies, or what type of those type of injuries, like what are the implications around how you can use those, even just those easy verbal cues to someone to actually kind of work around an injury, but still be able to give them like some sort of a training?
For sure. So, I generally coach 3 different types of jumps, I'll call them. You've got an absorb, where you might have a lot of knee flexion extension to soften the fall or like catch yourself on the ground. Then it might be a feel type jump, which is like a little bit faster and you feel the ground, but you're still trying to get off it pretty fast. And then you've got shock at the other end of the continuum, which is where you're going down, you're attacking the ground. There's very minimal knee flexion extension. It's mostly born about in the ankle, and that's like a continuum, right? Shock, feel, absorb, and so I'm going to bring up another point later because it's made me think of it as where people actually generate their force from, whether it's hips or knees, which is another real interesting conversation. But so these jumping strategies you might use with them based on what you're seeing. And if people do have injuries, obviously you would start with the absorb. And when they're feeling comfortable, then you might go up a step and go, okay, we want you to start attacking the ground a bit more. We still want you to be feeling the ground, but attacking the ground a bit more. And then when they're confident in that, and then maybe there's no pain or pain's below 2 out of 10, I don't know, depending on your philosophy and how you want to treat the patient. You may go, okay, we're going into a shock type jump where you're going to be attacking the ground. There's very minimal attempts to minimize the forces you're going to be absorbing. You're going to really be aiming for like stiff leg landing, where you're attacking the ground, and that would be a shock type jump. So that would be used again on a continuum based on how people are presenting to you and how well they can handle the type of jumping activities you've given them. In terms of the range of motion, that's a really that's another movement screen. You have people that flex a lot at both hip and knee. You have people that flex a lot at knee and not hip. You have people that flex a lot at hip and not knee. And you've got people that don't flex much at all in their jumping patterns. And so that's another thing to definitely be aware of, is the people where they might need to be coached in a different jumping strategy based on where the range of motion is occurring mostly in their jumping style and jumping pattern. So for instance, the person that isn't using much knee flexion extension in their jumping, and mainly hip, you might investigate, why is that the case? Is it because they can't load their patella tendons, their quads, you know what I mean? They don't have that necessary strength. Is it like muscle architecture and like length of gastroc and a few other things? What is the reasoning there? You might say, okay, well, we actually need to, as a strategy here, you need to have a little bit more knee flexion extension. I mean, we're also going to do our best to give you some sort of distal quad muscle bulk improvements in that to help you out with the style of jumping. And then on the other end, you might say, well, if mainly that you're predominantly a hip dominant jumper, we're going to reinforce that pattern by making sure your like glutes are really strong, your erectors are really strong, you know what I mean? Your upper hamstrings are really strong, and really go after it that way. So yeah, you've got these like strategies, jump strategies, and then you've also got the joints and how they go through their range of motion when they're actually when people are naturally jumping. And you'll pick up, the more you watch people jumping, they go through different ranges of motion and different joints to get what they want, their jumping strategy. There's lots of different jumping strategies out there, but essentially it involves a certain amount of flexion, extension at either knee or hip and ankle to get where they want to go.
So quite often with technique, what we see is there's like an acceptable range of techniques. Say you've looked at someone's hip and knee flexion in a jump. Do you have like any cutoff points for saying, okay, like performance-wise, we definitely need to change this to like get you to be jumping better? Or is it just one of those things where it's like, that's probably how you've always jumped, we'll just keep training that pattern? Are there any kind of things that you see as like a little red flag to say, okay, we need to change that?
Yeah, for sure. Like RSI, reactive strength index, which is your flight time divided by your contact time, or your jump height divided by your contact time, or reactive strength index modified, which is just contraction time instead of contact time. They can be improved dramatically in like 20 seconds of coaching. Like go down and up faster to the athlete, and you're jumping. Don't go down as deep. Like for instance, if there was, and this is a prime example, and I'm thinking of an actual university student that we did a jumping workshop at Bond University, just like a practical class for some of their undergrads, and he had this kid who was a weightlifter, very very heavily like good lower body leg bulk, that type of thing. Went through a massive range of motion with his counter movement jump, like really deep. Took a long time to generate force, and jumped reasonably high. As soon as we went and constrained the actual, we then moved into drop jumps. As soon as we constrained the contact time 250 milliseconds, his jump height just went out the window. He just didn't have experience producing force in a limited time frame. And so it's as soon as you see something like that, a massive range of motion, slow down, slow up, without really muscling things, you'd be like, yeah, we can be doing this better. Again, it might be a marker, a real rudimentary marker of tendon health as well. People that can't go real down and up really fast, but you'd be coaching them. You go, hey, we need to increase your contraction speed and get you moving down and up faster, getting more out of these tendons rather than trying to muscle everything.
Well, the cool thing I was thinking there, if you look at the whole like envelope of function kind of model, the stress recovery kind of adaptation model there, you're thinking like if he was then to go and do, if he was a weekend warrior, like a really good weightlifter, but a weekend warrior who went to play some sort of sport which involved a lot more short ground contact times and whatnot, but he's prepared for like, you know, being able to muscle, being able to kind of rely on his strength to get it, well, then his tendons probably don't have as big of capacity as like his training age and training history would possibly suggest.
He would have trouble with any running sport. He's like, you know what I mean? Any sport, field and court sport that involved locomotion above a jog, you know what I mean? That he would have trouble with that if he had to do a lot of it. And it's just if you need to be able to produce force in a certain time frame, if you can't do that, you need to learn how to, basically. That's the next step in the training toolbox.
Awesome. Just being mindful of time here. We'll probably have a couple more questions and then wrap up. Do you have any different considerations for upper limb plyometric training versus lower limb plyometric training? Do you change anything about how you would progress an athlete or choose volumes and things like that that are kind of generalizable to upper limb and lower limb?
I would say it's pretty similar in terms of it's assessing what an athlete can do, and then giving an intervention based on that, like seeing where they're at, whether it's like assessing where they are on this continuum of, you know what I mean, non-counter movement, double contact. Like you can use all those types of things with upper body. For instance, non-counter movement would just be in a push-up or an upper body push might be you hold a medicine ball on your chest for 3 seconds, then you throw it. You know what I mean? That would be the equivalent of a non-counter movement jump. Counter movement jump, hold a medicine ball with straight arms, bring it down to your chest and throw it really fast. Double contact, do 2 pumps of the medicine ball before throwing it. Same thing with doing a push-up. You could do a little pop before going down and doing it. A repeated, go bang, bang, bang. That'll be more intense. So it's the same concepts and same progressions that you do as a coach in the lower body and the upper body. And then, like obviously, you're dealing with smaller muscle groups, so you need to be mindful of the load. Like my grandma could say, our upper body's not as big as our lower body, so you need to be mindful of that. And then I'd say the other thing, and it's just like training the hamstrings for sprinting. And I suppose it's not, I do like activity, stretch shortening cycle activities for the hamstrings below 250 milliseconds, which wouldn't You could term plyometrics, but wouldn't be jumping activities. But you can do the same thing for the accelerators of the shoulder as well, if you're doing an upper body push. Same thing with the pulls, like upper body pulling. You're like a pull-up might turn like a non-counter movement for upper body. Like if you're strong enough, it might be from a dead hang, pulling up as fast as possible. If you really wanted to maximize that, then it might be down and up as fast as possible. Then you might be doing something like a kipping style pull-up to maximize stretch shortening cycle activity in the shoulder flexors. And yeah, it's that same continuum, and you can just apply it across the exercises based on what you want to get out of them.
You got anything to add there, Steve?
No, mate, all good. Love it.
Awesome. So probably one of the last questions, and then we'll look to wrap up. What are the main challenges that you've found with prescribing more explosive or plyometric type activities? Have you run into anything that crops up all the time, or like could it be perception with athletes or perception with like, I don't know, parents of kids and things like that about exercises they should and shouldn't be doing? Yeah, what have you experienced?
Yeah. I actually haven't had much to do with parents of kids, although I'm working at a high school. We've got a strength and conditioning coach there who does a really good job. I haven't had much to do with parents of kids. And generally though, what I've found is the parents of kids are more worried about them actually lifting weights than jumping around and like doing those type of activities. I have had situations with like a footballer I did like Achilles return to play with, and so we're doing a lot of jumping and rehabilitation. After I finished them, I was sending him some stuff that he could do, and he probably ended up doing too much. I took the reins off too much and gave him a bit too much inspiration. So all of a sudden he was doing like downhill bounds and all these different type of jumping activities. And his knee flared up and things like that. So yeah, you've just got to be mindful of, it's like anything, right? It's an inverted U. If you do too little or too much, you're going to get injured or not perform well. Like that's a universal truth basically around what we do. Like if you load the tendon too much, it's not going to be good. If you don't load the tendon at all, it's not going to be good for injury prevention and for actual performance. So it's just finding that Goldilocks warmth of the porridge you want to be eating.
Perfect, mate. That's awesome. Could I have one last one, which would, on this same tact of just like, have you used other, I think I mentioned to you earlier, maybe things like sand or hills or any of that to kind of change that, just like you did with your cues of kind of soft or quick attack? Have you used surfaces or anything like that to kind of change the load in through the tendons or whatever that they're getting there?
Yeah, 100%. Like there's even evidence that, and it makes a lot of sense. So if you're in a sport that requires like rate of force development, like say starting from blocks in a sport, you jumping off a quasi-closed surface like sand, where it's closed, but there's some movement in it, you'll improve that rate of force development rather versus you jumping off something like concrete, you know what I mean? So there's definitely uses for that, and definitely uses when, say, an athlete's coming back. They might do work in the long jump pit. Like I'm thinking, like an actual athletics athlete, they might do like low amplitude jumps on grass first, and low amplitude jumps in the long jump pit just to build up the tolerance in the lower extremity, like your calf and ankle, to tolerate some of the more advanced sort of sprinting and jumping things you might do. But yeah, hills for sure. Hills will obviously, they'll slow down contact times unless you're running down them. And I've used running down hills as much as running up hills. You can even use running down hills for like increased eccentric loading. Can be a strategy for like marathon runners that get really sore towards the back end, like 35K into the marathon. You can run down steep hills, build it up obviously appropriately, but that'll start preparing the joints and the lower limb for that type of eccentric loading that they'll go through. It's just another form of strength training. So yeah, I man, all those types of things, hills, sand, trampoline as well. Trampoline's awesome for increasing like rate of contraction. I've actually used it a lot myself. I had to like rupture my Achilles at the back end of 2020, and the trampoline's been awesome for me. Like single leg trampoline work's been awesome for me. Improving like it's actually surprising how much, although it was an Achilles injury, how much my left leg in terms of like overall triple extension in that left leg, especially knee extension, went downhill. And so I've used the trampoline a lot to bring back that high velocity component of it.
Awesome. I think I saw some backflips as part of that rehab as well. Is that right?
Yeah. That was probably pretty silly, but yeah. It was fun. It's fun.
No,
you know,
awesome.
when you get started, you just, it's just fun, right? And so you don't put on the brakes. Maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, backflips are so fun. Awesome. Well, yeah, I think we'll wrap up there. Thanks so much for coming on, mate. That was awesome chat. Yeah, so where can people find you? Where can we see your work? And yeah, can people get in touch with you? Things like that.
Yeah, look, I guess the best way is just like Instagram or Twitter, like at Joseph Coyne. So yeah, pretty simple. JOSEPHCOYNE is the handle, right? People are interested in my research. It's all on training load. I've done some stuff on upper body. My master's was on the effects of upper body strength on sprint paddling and surfboards, like surfboard paddling. So stuff on that. But their master's was all on training load across different sports. And so ResearchGate is another place if people are interested, they can jump on there and check it out.
Awesome. Thanks, mate. Well, that wraps up another episode of the RPE podcast. Keep an eye out for the summary coming up, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, mate. See you later.